Okay. You're going to select the security designer.
Okay.
And over on the top left portion of the screen, you may only have one security profile at this moment.
Mhm.
Now, if you'd like to go ahead and verify that, you certainly can. But what we're looking for here is the main administrative profile. So it's either going to be called administrator or SecAdmin, SEC, which was the old legacy terminology for an administrative user.
Right.
After you highlight that profile, over on the bottom middle section here, there's a checkbox labeled Migration Aid.
Okay.
And we're going to ask you to mark that and then close out of this Security Designer screen.
Okay.
Okay? Now, for good measure, you may...
I'm not doing this now. I'm just listening, just so you know.
Yeah, that's okay. And actually, this session is being recorded and will be posted, so you can always, review it when you're ready to take the plunge.
Okay.
So once you've done that, for good measure, you may just want to sign out and sign back in with the administrative account, which, unless you've changed the password, it should just be SECADM.
Mhm. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Once you're logged back in, you're going to select Migration Aid from the admin drop-down menu.
Migration aid. Okay.
Okay? You're going to select Legacy Security Converter.
Mhm.
Now, what this is going to do is this is going to allow you to view all of your existing security levels from the legacy system. This is what determined, who would be able to log onto the system and perform all the various functions.
Mhm.
You're just going to click on one at a time, and you're going to give it a new profile name. Now, you can certainly just name them after whatever it is that you used in the legacy system. That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
And just click on the Apply button and just repeat this step until you've copied all of your profiles over. So what you're doing here is you're copying your legacy security settings into what we now call security profiles for Schedule App.
Okay, and I only have to do that first part for the security designer for the admin?
That's right, because you're probably logging on with as an administrator or with an administrative account. So that just means that whoever logs on with that security profile not only has access to every function within the system, but that they will also have access to the migration aid in order to copy over some of those legacy settings.
Okay.
Okay? Now, you're almost done at this point. We're going to close out of this once we have copied all of those over. And under the Employee Center,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to select User Profile.
Okay.
Now, this screen should look very similar to what you used in the legacy system. You use something like this to create logins and to assign people to whatever security levels they had.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right now, I only have 3 generic logins, so of course you should see a much longer list when you log on here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you're going to do is you're going to highlight the individuals on the list, and over on the right, you're going to select their security profile. If they were a SEC officer in the legacy system, then just select that under the security profile section.
Okay.
Okay? you can go ahead and click on the Save button after you have converted everyone over.
Okay, so not after each time, just after total?
Yeah, just go through each one, select a new security profile, and save before moving on to the next one.
Okay, I got you.
Okay. All right, so in addition to that, Jennifer, there is another class I would recommend that you attend. It's one of our advanced setup training classes, and Robert, eventually we're going to ask you to do the same thing. We have a class where you can learn how to customize security to better fit your needs. Now, Jennifer, you're just at this point copying everyone over to what is essentially the old settings, but with this new version, we're offering a lot of new features. Therefore, there's a lot more security settings that you can apply, things that you were not able to apply in the older version. So I would definitely consider checking that out. It is Advanced Setup Class number 7, and it is called Advanced Security Settings, and we give those on a regular basis. So you're actually ready, Jennifer, to sign up for that class on the next offering. But I would also start looking at any of the basic user classes that we have coming up, as well as the supervisory classes as well. That way you can get an idea of what the new interface looks like.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Okay. And so, Jennifer, you're more than welcome to stick around for the rest of this class. We are going to talk a little bit more about how security is designed within this application, but our main focus is going to be creating logins and passwords en masse. So, Robert, this is definitely for you. Okay. And again, I'm recording the sessions. So once the class ends, about an hour or so afterwards, you should receive an email confirmation with a link to that video. Okay. All right, so because we have a small group, I'm not going to mute the microphones. If there's a little excessive noise coming from the background, I may do it then. But for now, we're about ready to go. So for today's class, of course, we're going to be working within the desktop application. We're going to select Administration from the top. And from the Employee Center category, we're going to select Mass Auto Create Users. So at this stage, you probably have your schedules fully built, or you may be working on it. You should have employee profiles for everyone who will be scheduled through the system. Now what we have to do is grant them access to the system. Now from this screen, you're going to be able to select which groups of employees you want to create logins for, and you may find it's easier to do this in groups. So you may want to create logins for your basic users, then create logins for your supervisors, and then logins for any administrators. We're also going to look at a number of ways that you can create login types. So whether you want to use first initial last name as a login, perhaps you may want to use an employee ID instead. This middle section is going to allow you to set that up. The section just below that is where we're going to assign that group a security profile. So as I mentioned before, you may choose to do this in groups. Try doing your basic users first, then your supervisors, and so on. Along with just assigning them to a security profile, you're also going to be able to assign them to a web dashboard and a default tile profile. Web dashboards are simply how the shifts are arranged on the web portal, and most of your basic users and supervisors would fall under this category. In fact, many of them may not ever use the desktop application. For those that will have access to the desktop application, you will be able to choose what the default tile profile for that particular group is. And your default tile profiles were created during class number 4. That's where you created the various pages of daily, monthly, and weekly schedule views. And depending on your size and what your needs are, you may have created more than one profile. So if you did, this is where you will be able to select what the default is for the group of employees that you're working with. Now we're going to just minimize that screen for a moment. And again, that was mass auto create users. We're going to come back to that. But for now, we're going to go back to that security designer. And we're going to talk a little bit about the included security profiles. These are the ones that sort of come out of the box. These are based on VCS's recommended security settings. And that just simply means that based on our experience and our knowledge of the system, we have a very good idea as to what basic users need to do within the system, what supervisors need to do, and of course what administrators need to do. So over on the left, you're going to see 6 security profiles that have been already created. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about what each one of these do. And our recommendation is that even if you need to reconfigure these, modify them in any way, we would recommend using our settings initially during your basic training. And that is because all of the training classes that you're going to take, whether it's for basic users or for supervisors, the content of those training classes are all based on what these security settings have been applied. So starting with user, which would cover about 85 to 90% of your user base, this profile is designed for basic users, non-supervisory level users, who simply need to be able to view schedules, request time off, request payment for overtime work in the event that their shift runs longer. They will also have the ability to sign up for extra duty or side jobs, whichever way you refer to them. And users will also be able to sign up for department overtime via what we call open shifts. Now, all users can only request time off or overtime on their own behalf, but they will be able to see schedules department-wide. So they will be able to see when other people are working, when they're not working. They'll be able to see if someone is on the schedule via overtime, but they will not be able to request time off on anyone else's behalf except their own. Now, the user security profile does not provide access to the desktop application. Since the desktop application is designed primarily for administrators, this profile is designed really around allowing your basic users to perform all scheduled tasks within the web portal. Now, the next one we're going to look at is the administrator one at the very top. And the administrator profile allows for full access to the entire system and everyone in it. This is the security profile that you should all belong to. Those of you that are going to be building schedules or have been involved in the schedule build thus far should all belong to this particular profile. Now, as you can see, we have multiple supervisor profiles available. And so the most commonly used one would be the straight-up supervisor profile. And this allows all of the same functionality that basic users have. So supervisors will be able to request time off as well as overtime on their own behalf. But they'll also be able to place time off and overtime onto the schedule on behalf of others. So if a supervisor receives a call from someone who's calling out sick, they should be able to post that information onto the schedule. They may also need to be able to fill staffing shortages using call lists or open shifts, which would allow basic users to sign up for overtime opportunities as they become available. Now, the supervisor profile allows any supervisor to approve time off and overtime entries for any basic user within their organization. But they are not going to be able to approve time off or overtime on their own behalf. So once a supervisor tries to request a day off, their only option will be to submit a request. However, they will be able to apply approved time off for anyone that reports to them. The next profile is called supervisor group. The only difference here is that supervisors will only be able to approve time off and overtime or assign either one of those things to people within their own departments. And for some of you, that might be an actual department. For some of you, it might be a squad or a platoon. So someone belonging to the supervisor group who's, let's say, a sergeant of a squad would only be able to apply time off and overtime to the schedule for those within that squad. My recommendation, though, is that in an example like that, you would just make all sergeants supervisors, because then that takes care of the issue where people are switching with one another, and now a Squad A sergeant is covering a Squad B shift. So I think the supervisor is probably the best fit for most of you. Now, supervisor extra duty and supervisor training are just like the original supervisor profile, with the added functionality of the extra duty billing module, and of course this one gives access to the training and certification module. So if you have anyone that not only is a supervisor, but they're also responsible for coordinating extra duty work, or maybe they coordinate training, you can assign them to one of these, and then they would have that access. They would be able to assign someone to a training class, or under this one, they would be able to create and assign someone to an extra duty job. Now, if you click on one of the security profiles over on the bottom right, if you click on Update Objects, you'll receive back a list of screens that that profile has access to. Now, you can organize this list by any of the categories up top. I'll just click on Allow twice, just so that we can see all of the screens that supervisors have access to. In this column, we have the category that the screen falls under. Is this an employee-based function? Is it a supervisor-based function? Is it a report or perhaps a payroll-related function? Under name is the name of the screen. To the right, it will indicate whether that screen is found in the desktop application, in the web portal, or both. Let's take a step back. And while we still have the supervisor profile highlighted, we're going to click on Go to Default Privilege. So the last screen showed us a list of functions that people had access to. This screen controls who they can perform those functions for. All actions means that the employee in that profile will be able to perform every function listed for anyone within the department. As you can see, I don't have any checkboxes marked except for omit self. And what we're saying here is that we are not blanketly allowing supervisors to perform every single function that we gave them to every employee. There might just be certain conditions involved. Now, of the 30, 40, or 50 screens that you grant, if you choose to say, well, supervisors should be able to approve their own time off, they should be able to put maybe a lieutenant, maybe someone above their rank on time off in case someone like that calls in and that supervisor is running the shift. You can choose to switch that to all shifts, all groups, all employees, and you can just unmark the omit self. Now again, these security settings are based on our recommended uses of the system, so we'll leave it set to the defaults, and we're going to move on to viewable. Here, we're saying supervisors can view any employees on any shift in any group. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll be able to perform functions on behalf of those folks. It just means that they will be able to view schedule information as well as any reports. Under requestable, this refers to time off and overtime. When an individual requests time off, we need to tell the system who they can place a request on behalf of. Here, a supervisor can place a request for any employee on any shift in any group, including themselves. Under approvable, we have slightly different settings here. When a supervisor attempts to put time off or overtime onto the schedule, they can enter it as approved time off or overtime for anyone but themselves. So they would only be able to request on their own behalf, but they will be able to enter it as approved for those that fall below their own title. So a sergeant would not be able to approve time off or overtime for a lieutenant with this particular setting. Approve with stipulation and deny are more or less set up the same way. So once again, you can allow someone to simply request or approve on their own behalf, or you can give them different rights for other people. So again, my example before was a sergeant gets a call from a lieutenant who says, I'm not going to be in today, and now that sergeant has to post that information onto the schedule, you may consider at some point removing that checkbox and allowing the supervisor to apply the time off or overtime activity directly onto the schedule. Now, once you have gone through the basic user and supervisor training classes, you may choose to reconfigure those security settings or maybe add additional security settings. That, again, is Advanced Class AD VCS number 7. And during that class, we would go through those settings a bit more closely. But for now, we're going to close out of the screen. And back under the Employee Center, we're going to select Mass Auto Create Users. And I believe that was here somewhere at the bottom. There we go. So I'm going to start with my largest group first, which are my basic users. And in my relatively small department of 29 employees, I'm going to use the title button over to the right just to select my officers, detectives, and some of my civilian staff who would be considered basic users. There's my officers, my detectives. I have a clerk. Now we'll click on the Select and Close button, and it will just filter out those 19 people for me. I'm going to click on the All button to make sure that everyone has a check next to their name. Of course, you can do that by hand. So if there is someone within this group who's going to have a different security profile, other than the basic user one that we just looked at, you can go ahead and choose them individually. Let's click on Select and Close. And you'll now see everyone's name listed at the very bottom. And you'll notice some of mine are displayed in green, which if we use the color chart over to the right, means that they already have a login. And in fact, you have a checkbox here that says, don't worry about those with existing logins. We're not going to create new ones for them or overwrite whatever they currently have in the system. Next, under Options, we're going to choose what our usernames are going to be for everyone. So you can choose to use first initial last name, in which case just select how many letters of the first name you want. Using the checkboxes, I'll select full last name. And up top, when I click on Apply Format, it will show me those usernames. Now you can ignore the caps. Usernames will never be case sensitive. But let's take a look at some other possible settings. So instead of first letter and last name, we might choose to use a payroll ID. If you're using an employee code, perhaps a badge number or some other employee ID, you can choose to use that. Now, you can use any one of these sections in combination with one another. I can use first letter of the first name, 5 letters of the last name, as well as inserting the payroll ID. And when I click on Apply Format, that's what the usernames would look like. Now that might be a bit difficult for people to remember, at least early on, so you may choose to use something easier, like a employee code. And employee codes are great because they're unique. And in all likelihood, your employees know what those numbers are, especially if you're using a badge number. Now, if you are tracking the badge number separately in the employee profile, there is an option for that as well. Now, first initial, last name works fine, but if you're the type of department where you're going to have, multiple J. Smiths, you may want to consider using something else other than first initial, last name. Now, for mine, I'll stick with maybe first few letters of the first name and 5 letters of the last name. And we'll move on to the user profile section below. So now everyone that I'm working with here on the list is going to be a basic user. So the security profile I select is going to affect everyone on this list, and all the more reason to create these in groups. That's why I mentioned before, doing your users first, then your supervisors and administrators. Over to the right, if you have multiple dashboards, select what the default dashboard is. Now, another tip, if you did create multiple web dashboards, maybe one for patrol, one for communications, when you're filtering out your employees, you may want to look for users within the patrol group. That way you can apply that setting, and then you can just repeat this process for your communications and assign them to their web dashboard. That's pretty rare. Normally we see, one web dashboard for most departments works well, but depending on your size and how your schedules are structured, you may have chosen to create more. Under default tile profile, select the profile that will be defaulted to that group. Now, in my case, I'll select police department schedule, which is really the only one that I use here. That's this desk dashboard that I created. Whether or not you grant your basic users access to the desktop application is entirely up to you. It will absolutely work. But it is just another program or something else that you have to train them on. So we find the web portal does just as good of a job. Now, if they do not have the desktop application installed on their computers, well, they simply can't access it. Whereas with the web portal, they only need to know what the address is. Under number of past days to allow update, you're going to tell the system how many days back your users can go onto the schedule and apply time off or overtime entries. So using the number 7 here as an example, this allows basic users the ability to go back 7 days on the schedule and apply time off and overtime. So if you have someone who worked late at the end of their shift, hopefully sooner rather than later, they log on to the system and they submit their request. If, however, they forget, they have up to 7 days to log on to the system, go to that day where they worked overtime, and to submit their request. If they wait any longer than 7 days, they might have to go to a supervisor or an administrator because the system will just not allow them to post that. VCS's recommended settings is 7 to 14 days. Now, once we have that group assigned to a security profile, at the very least a web dashboard, and we have the number of past days that they can apply time off or overtime to the schedule, you can now click on the Save button. And within a few seconds, it should tell you how many user profiles it created. Now close out of the screen and go back and repeat the process for the next group of employees. Let's do that. Let's click on Select Employees. This time, I'm going to use the Title button to select my sergeants, detective sergeants, and for some of you, the lieutenants might fall into this category. And now we're dealing with a much smaller group. Let's select all 5 of these employees and click on the Select and Close button. Now the middle section is already set for you. So based on whatever naming convention you choose, just go ahead and move on to the bottom portion, select their security profile, and if necessary, select what their default web dashboard is and what their default desktop tile profile will be. Now for supervisors, you may choose to go a little further out, perhaps 30 days or 90 days. Up top, click on Apply Format to make sure that you have the usernames, and then click on the Save button. One last time for our administrators. I'll choose my chief, captain, and deputy chief. These guys, of course, are administrators, and under number of past days to allow update, you may choose to give them access for the entire year. Let's apply that format and click Save to complete. So let's close out of that screen, and we're going to take a look also under the Employee Center back to the user profile screen. We saw this earlier. Now you'll notice that you have user logins for everyone in the system, along with username and a password you're not going to be able to see. Now the default passwords for all of your users will be first initial, last name with an 8-character limit on the last name. That's very important because everyone is going to need to know that the first time they log on to the system. Now, you will not be able to retrieve someone's password, but you will be able to, as an administrator, reset it. Just enter the screen, type in 12345, 12345 under confirm password, and then the next time the employee logs onto the system, they will have to change that. So let's look at a couple of other settings here. So David Lopez here, who's a basic user, never had access to the profile. The security profile itself has to have permission to view that. So it didn't matter that I made it a default. If David was never given permission because the user profile doesn't have permission to see that screen or group of screens, then that will appear blank. In the middle section, We have the employee profile that the login is tied to. Security level will be the security level that the employee had in the legacy system. And so if you never used our legacy system, if you're brand new to our program, then that middle portion, you can leave that alone. Security profile is the important one. So if by chance you created your logins and passwords for everyone, and you realized you put someone in the wrong security profile, just find them on the list, click on the drop-down menu, and select the right one. Under number of past days to allow update, there's the 7 that we applied globally, or almost globally. You can certainly adjust it by individual as well. So if this was a supervisor, we may allow them to go back 30 days instead of the 7 for basic users. In the bottom section, by default, force user to change password on next web login will always be marked. So the first time your users log on, they're going to enter their temporary password, which is first initial, last name with an 8-character limit. And immediately they're going to be asked to choose a new password. Now that password will not expire. They will never be asked to change it. And the password can be anything they'd like it to be. Under Web Account Locked, you might see this especially during your initial rollout, people simply forgetting their passwords. If and when this happens, log on to this screen. You will find the checkbox marked here. And what that means is that the user tried entering the wrong password too many times. Therefore, the system locks them out. You can then use this screen to unmark it, and then provide them with a new password. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, or in this case, D. Lopez would have been fine. Now, the last setting here is a tab called Web Settings. This was the default web dashboard that you assigned to that employee via the group. This can also be changed. So again, if any mistakes are made during the mass auto create screen, you can always use this one to fine-tune any individual login. You can also delete ones that perhaps were made in error, or maybe you would just be comfortable redoing the entire group. If it's a small department, you're free to do that, but you will have to delete them one by one. Close out of that screen. Now, when you signed up for this class, you should have received a document called the Basic Setup 7. And you also receive a copy once the class is done, along with the link to the video. And in it is just some screenshots covering what we discussed today with instructions, how each section is configured, now, in the event that you have any difficulty whatsoever logging onto the system and performing a function based on security, my recommendation will be to sign up for the help out sessions. on the page that you use to register for this class, you may have noticed a category called Help Out Sessions. Those are 45-minute one-on-one sessions that allow us to work with you on your specific needs. So we understand completely that these classes are covered at a somewhat high level. So if for some reason you need a little help completing any one of the steps covered in this afternoon's session, you're free to sign up for those. They're given on a regular basis. You can sign up for them. And those sessions can also be recorded at your request. Now, that's actually all that we had on the agenda for today. So what I'd like to do now is just open it up to not only any questions that you have, but if you would like to try to complete these steps while we still have a few minutes left in today's session, now would be a great time to do that. If you feel comfortable with everything discussed, you can go ahead and close out of the session, and I thank you for registering today. But please be on the lookout for the follow-up email to today's session with the video and the guide that I just showed you. Okay. Are there any questions with regards to creating those logins?
No, I think you covered it pretty thoroughly.
Okay. Okay. And Robert, you guys have on-site training, right? You guys purchased on-site training?
Yes, it's the last week of September, I believe, after the conference in Atlantic City.
I gotcha. Are you going to be attending that conference by any chance?
Yes, I will.
Oh, awesome. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. Yeah, I look forward to meeting you there. But I'm also going to be your on-site trainer. So I'll be working a little bit more closely with you guys on your setup and finishing things up. So please, sign up for those help out sessions. I'm also going to send you just an email with my contact information so you can get in touch with me directly when necessary.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.